You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. We'll be okay. But when it does happen to you, then it takes you into some pretty,
Prince William just completely defied decades of royal protocol, launching a sudden, aggressive estate crackdown on Queen Camilla's inner circle that has stunned the palace. In an unprecedented move, the Prince of Wales has targeted Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, stripping her of highly lucrative, long-held design contracts across the royal properties. This isn't a minor administrative change. It is a total financial purge of the step-family tree to ensure absolute corporate transparency. Behind closed doors, Camilla is calling the eviction a malicious public attack, but William has officially drawn his red lines. The war for the crown's multi-billion-pound empire has exploded, and the old court rules are dead. An unsigned lease and an eviction notice at duchy property. A thick manila envelope stamped with the deep blue wax seal of the Duchy of Cornwall's Executive Council landed on the desk of Annabel Elliot's London design firm at precisely 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in July 26. Inside the envelope was a single, 2-page legal notice signed directly by Prince William's chief administrative officer. The text was entirely devoid of the traditional, polite diplomatic greetings usually exchanged within the royal household. It was a cold, binding corporate eviction notice. The document informed Queen Camilla's 81-year-old sister that her 20-year tenure as the chief interior designer for the royal estates had been terminated, effective immediately. Every single one of her ongoing commercial retainers across the duchy's multi-billion-pound portfolio was officially canceled, and her design teams were given exactly 14 days to completely clear their equipment and fabric archives from all royal properties. The facts behind this aggressive estate crackdown were rooted in a highly sensitive financial audit that William had quietly launched shortly after assuming full control of the Duchy of Cornwall. As the Prince of Wales, William operated as the sole corporate landlord of the ancient estate, which included over 130,000 acres of land, commercial properties, and historic homes across the United Kingdom. The private audit, compiled by an independent international accounting firm in early 26, uncovered a series of highly irregular financial transfers. For over 2 decades, Annabel Elliot had been awarded lucrative interior design contracts for the refurbishment of high-profile royal properties, including Highgrove House and the Llywelyn Wearmouth estate in Wales, entirely without a competitive public bidding process. The audit revealed that her firm had been quietly receiving significantly inflated fees directly from the duchy's treasury, authorized through a legacy arrangement established by King Charles during his tenure as Prince of Wales. The tension within the palace administration reached an absolute breaking point before the lunchtime staff shift change. Queen Camilla viewed the sudden eviction not as a routine commercial audit, but as a direct, calculated assault on her immediate family and her position at the court. She immediately realized that William had completely bypassed traditional royal protocol, which dictated that any changes involving the inner circle must be managed through private, face-to-face family discussions to avoid public embarrassment. By serving her sister with a formal corporate eviction notice without any prior warning, the Prince of Wales was making a brutal statement to the entire household. He was declaring that the old era of court favoritism and unmonitored family retainers was completely dead, and he was prepared to use his immense financial power to purge the step-family tree from the crown's balance sheets. William did not back down an inch when Camilla confronted him about the crackdown in a private drawing room at Clarence house. He stood by the window, looking out over the London gardens, his expression completely rigid. He explained to his stepmother that the decision was based strictly on modern commercial compliance and absolute financial transparency. Under the strict new corporate procurement policies he had introduced at the duchy headquarters, every single contract funded by the estate had to go through a rigorous, transparent competitive tender process to protect the institution from accusations of nepotism. He told her that allowing the Queen's sister to maintain a monopoly on royal design projects without any external review was an unacceptable liability that he would never permit to continue under his leadership. The mystery that Camilla's inner circle scrambled to investigate was whether William had discovered a deeper, hidden financial connection that could jeopardize her family's long-term standing. The answer was found in a confidential section of the audit report that William's compliance team had delivered directly to King Charles at Sandringham. The accountants had discovered that several of Annabel Elliott's design retainers had been structured to bypass standard parliamentary review, allowing her to draw continuous income directly from Crown asset dividends, without being officially listed on the royal payroll. William viewed this hidden arrangement as a profound breach of institutional ethics that threatened the corporate legitimacy of the entire monarchy. He used the audit findings to establish an absolute red line, making it clear that no non-blood relative would ever be allowed to exploit Crown resources for private financial gain while he managed the estate. The tactical execution of the crackdown proceeded with total efficiency over the next 48 hours. William's security teams arrived at several duchy-owned holiday properties in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, officially locking the doors to the design suites and placing independent audit tags on all physical inventories. Annabel Elliott's designers were barred from accessing the properties without a signed authorization from Kensington Palace. The move completely dismantled her firm's operational footprint within the royal network, proving to the entire court that the Prince of Wales was already actively exercising the raw, absolute power of the sovereign well before his formal coronation. Camilla was incandescent with rage, calling the crackdown a vindictive and malicious effort to publicly humiliate her sister, who had served the king faithfully for decades. She pointed out that Annabel's design choices had been universally praised for revitalizing the royal properties, creating a classic British country style that had significantly boosted the estate's tourism revenues. She argued that William's sudden enforcement of corporate procurement rules was being used as a weapon to completely isolate her family from the material fabric of the court. She demanded that the king step in to overrule the eviction, but Charles, facing his own delicate health regime and fully aware of his son's absolute legal autonomy over the duchy assets, refused to spark an open constitutional war with his heir over a design contract. The king's refusal to interfere left Camilla entirely isolated within the palace hierarchy. The senior trustees and financial directors of the royal collection and the privy purse quickly aligned themselves with William's new corporate regulations, recognizing that the Prince of Wales was now the true defining power behind the daily operations of the monarchy. They understood that the old rules of the court were being systematically dismantled to ensure the long-term survival of the institution in a modern, transparent era. The financial boundaries had been drawn with total finality, and the step-family tree had been completely severed from the Crown's multi-billion-pound empire. William watched the successful completion of the estate purge from his private office at Adelaide Cottage with absolute satisfaction. He had successfully protected the financial integrity of the Crown, enforced the strict rules of corporate compliance, and secured a vital structural advantage over his stepmother's household. The diamond brooches were safe, the children's heirlooms were locked behind biometric codes, and now the multi-billion-pound revenues of the Duchy of Cornwall were completely cleansed of outside family influence. The corporate sovereign had asserted total control, leaving the old court rules buried forever behind the closed doors of Windsor Castle. The strategic purge of the inner circle. A digital file cabinet inside the secure server room at the Duchy of Cornwall's headquarters in London hummed quietly as the encryption logs updated at precisely 2 o'clock. It was mid-July 26. A senior compliance officer clicked through a massive spreadsheet titled Legacy Inner Circle Retainers. He highlighted 36 individual corporate entries connected to Annabel Elliott's Gloucestershire design firm, clicked the administrative delete button, and authorized a total system block. The action took less than 5 seconds, but it officially erased 20 years of court history, closing a financial pipeline that had funded the aesthetic transformation of the king's private empire since the early 2000s. The facts regarding Annabel Elliott's deep integration into the royal infrastructure were extensive and well documented within the private records of the household. For over 2 decades, she had served as King Charles's chief interior designer, completely dictating the look, style, and atmosphere of his most cherished personal residences. She was the creative force behind the extensive, multi-million-pound renovations of Highgrove House in Gloucestershire, the private holiday cottages in Cornwall, and the remote Llywelyn Vermod estate in Wales. She was not a standard independent contractor bidding for commercial projects. She was a fixture of the court, possessing unrestricted access to the private quarters and holding an unwritten mandate to refresh the sovereign environments whenever she saw fit. The tension over her position began to mount during the transition of the Duchy of Cornwall assets following the change of reign. When Prince William officially inherited the title of Duke of Cornwall and the multi-billion-pound estate that accompanied it, he ordered a comprehensive review of all external service agreements. His newly appointed corporate compliance team quickly noticed that Annabel Elliott's firm did not appear anywhere on the official civil service payroll or the public parliamentary expense registers. Instead, her company operated through a complex network of rolling retainer contracts and private consulting fees that were paid directly out of the Duchy's private commercial accounts, entirely shielded from public scrutiny and democratic review. William viewed this legacy arrangement as a massive institutional vulnerability that threatened the modern credibility of the crown. In an era where the public demanded absolute financial accountability and total transparency from the royal family, the existence of unvouched, high-value contracts awarded to the Queen's sister without any competitive bidding was a severe liability. He ordered his compliance directors to launch a systematic evaluation of every invoice submitted by Elliott's firm over the previous 5 years. The resulting data confirmed that the Duchy had been paying significantly higher rates for fabrics, furnishings, and labor than the standard commercial market required, effectively subsidizing a private family business using estate funds. The mystery that Kensington Palace needed to resolve before executing the final purge was whether these design contracts were legally binding or if they could be dismantled without triggering a prolonged breach of contract lawsuit. The answer was uncovered by William's legal team within the fine print of the original framework agreements drafted during Charles's tenure as Duke. The contracts had been structured as discretionary personal services retainers, meaning they were entirely dependent on the personal authorization of the reigning Duke of Cornwall. The moment William inherited the estate, the legal authority to maintain or terminate those retainers transferred completely to his office. He held the absolute legal right to clear the books without any financial penalty. The Prince of Wales used this legal clarity to execute a swift, total purge of the design firm's operational footprint. On July 14, 26, the compliance team formally issued a series of non-renewal notices to Elliott's legal representatives, officially terminating every single active project. The strategic move did not just stop future designs. It canceled the ongoing maintenance retainers for the holiday properties in the Isles of Scilly, where Elliott's firm had been paid a continuous monthly fee to oversee the interior presentation of the royal rental villas. The entire corporate relationship was completely dismantled in a single business week, separating the inner circle from the estate's finances with clinical precision. Camilla's personal staff reacted to the news with total consternation, recognizing that the removal of her sister was a devastating blow to the Queen's informal power network within the palace. For years, Annabel's presence at the various royal estates had provided Camilla with a trusted, loyal ally who could monitor the domestic environment and manage high-level social arrangements without corporate interference. By removing Elliot from the properties, William was not just changing the interior decorator. He was actively stripping his stepmother of her eyes and ears within the private households, establishing an absolute monopoly of control over the physical spaces inhabited by the family. The tactical purge proceeded without any public fanfare, but the internal message to the household staff was undeniably clear. Every single department head within the royal collection, the privy purse, and the master of the household's office received a strict, updated code of conduct document from Kensington Palace. The code explicitly stated that any future contract for interior design, catering, landscaping, or maintenance must be routed through a public, transparent commercial bidding pool managed by independent procurement officers. No exceptions would be made for personal friends, extended relatives, or historical associates of any member of the family, regardless of their rank. William sat at his desk at Adelaide Cottage, reviewing the final confirmation logs from the Duchy compliance room. He knew that the strategic purge of Annabel Elliott's firm was a vital step in modernizing the Crown's business practices and protecting the institution from the damaging accusations of favoritism that had plagued previous generations. He had successfully demonstrated to his advisors, the government, and the wider court that he would never allow personal relationships to compromise the absolute financial integrity of his future kingdom. The legacy design retainers were permanently closed, the old court rules were buried, and the corporate sovereign had successfully secured the absolute legitimacy of the empire's multi-billion-pound estate behind closed palace doors. Drawing the financial boundary lines. A leather-bound ledger containing the updated corporate procurement charter for the Duchy of Cornwall was formally signed at the estate's main administrative headquarters in London. It was the afternoon of July 16, 26. Prince William used a black fountain pen to append his signature to the final page, officially enacting a strict new commercial policy that completely restructured how the multi-billion-pound royal empire conducted its business. The document did not contain any traditional clauses allowing for royal exemptions or discretionary family retainers. It was an ironclad corporate framework designed to eliminate every trace of financial favoritism, drawing a permanent boundary line between the public wealth of the crown and the private financial interests of the extended step-family tree. The facts regarding the Duchy of Cornwall's vast economic power explained why William was entirely determined to enforce absolute financial transparency across its operations. The estate, which was founded in 1337 to provide an independent source of income for the heir to the throne, had grown into a massive commercial conglomerate. By 26, the portfolio included significant land holdings across 23 British counties, residential developments, high-value commercial properties in central London, and millions of pounds invested in international financial markets. The revenues generated by this empire funded the entire public and private apparatus of the Prince and Princess of Wales's household, giving William total, independent financial autonomy from the central taxpayer-funded sovereign grant. The tension generated by William's aggressive enforcement of the new procurement charter was felt immediately throughout the palace administrative offices. Under the legacy system, managed by King Charles during his long tenure as Duke, the estate had frequently been used to provide quiet financial support, real estate access, and lucrative commercial opportunities to close personal friends, artistic collaborators, and members of the extended family. Charles viewed these arrangements as a traditional form of royal patronage, using the immense resources of the duchy to cultivate a loyal, sophisticated inner circle. But William looked at the exact same data through the lens of modern corporate governance, recognizing that unvouched, non-competitive contracts awarded to relatives like Annabel Elliot were an existential threat to the crown's survival in a democratic era. The Prince of Wales used his absolute legal authority as the sole landlord of the estate to issue a strict administrative directive to all financial controllers and property managers. He ordered a complete, immediate freeze on all discretionary allowances and personal retainers that had not been subjected to an independent, competitive public bidding process within the previous 12 months. The directive effectively mandated that every single supplier, from high-value interior design firms to local agricultural contractors, had to submit to a rigorous compliance check managed by an external accounting board. No payments could be authorized, and no contracts could be renewed without an official certificate of transparency issued by the new Kensington Palace oversight team. The mystery that deeply unsettled Queen Camilla's financial advisors was whether William intended to extend this strict commercial audit to the private family allowances funded by the king's personal estate, the Duchy of Lancaster. The answer was uncovered within a confidential letter that William had sent directly to King Charles at Sandringham shortly before the procurement charter was signed. In the letter, William explicitly stated that the long-term survival of the monarchy required a coordinated, unified approach to financial transparency across all royal estates. He strongly advised his father to implement identical corporate procurement rules within the Duchy of Lancaster, effectively warning that Kensington Palace would publicly distance its operations from any household that continued to fund unmonitored family retainers or private business partnerships with non-blood relatives. William's uncompromising stance on drawing these financial boundary lines was driven by a clear, strategic vision for the future of his reign. He understood that the British public's toleration of the royal family's immense wealth and structural privilege depended entirely on the institution's ability to demonstrate total accountability, public service, and absolute integrity. If the tabloids or investigative journalists were able to prove that the crown was using its untaxed commercial revenues to enrich the sibling of a queen consort through inflated, unvouched design retainers, the moral authority of the monarchy would be permanently shattered. By executing the estate crackdown on Annabel Elliot, William was proactively neutralizing a major public relations liability, establishing a precedent of corporate purity that would govern the court for the next 40 years. The tactical rollout of the new financial boundaries proceeded with clinical precision across all duchy properties. The compliance team officially terminated the open-ended fabric and antique procurement accounts that Elliott's firm had utilized at several historic properties, rerouting all future purchasing through an independent, centralized supply chain management firm. Every single invoice submitted to the Treasury was subjected to a digital forensic audit to ensure that the prices paid for luxury furnishings conformed strictly to standard commercial market values. The administrative purge left absolutely no room for negotiation, proving to the entire court that the Prince of Wales was fully prepared to dismantle the old, cozy traditions of the inner circle to secure the absolute corporate legitimacy of his future kingdom. Camilla viewed the implementation of the procurement charter as a deeply offensive and vindictive effort to strip her family of their historical connection to the royal environments. She argued that her sister's work had significantly enhanced the asset value of the duchy properties, creating a highly marketable, prestigious aesthetic that had driven record-breaking tourism revenues for the estate's holiday cottage division. She accused William of using corporate compliance as a convenient political smokescreen to execute a personal, systematic campaign of isolation against her bloodline. But William remained completely unyielding, reminding his stepmother that the wealth of the Duchy of Cornwall was an instrument of the state, held in trust for the direct line of succession, and it would never be used to subsidize the private commercial interests of the step-family tree. The financial boundaries were now permanently drawn within the corporate architecture of the monarchy. William had successfully demonstrated to the Cabinet Office, the Treasury, and the Privy Council that his administration would operate with an unprecedented level of discipline, transparency, and modern corporate efficiency. He had successfully insulated his future kingdom from the damaging accusations of favoritism and nepotism that had compromised previous generations, establishing an unyielding standard of governance that left the old court rules buried forever behind the closed doors of Windsor Castle. A furious clash at Clarence house. The heavy crystal drops of a Regency chandelier rattled in the drawing room at Clarence house as a door was closed with sharp, deliberate force. It was late afternoon. Outside the tall sash windows, the London traffic crawled along the mall, entirely insulated from the raw, unfiltered family crisis that had just erupted inside the private apartments. Queen Camilla stood by the fireplace, her hands clenched tightly around a silver presentation pen, her face pale with an intense, long-simmering anger. Prince William stood near the mahogany writing desk, his arms crossed firmly over his chest, his expression completely rigid. The private space, usually a quiet sanctuary for the king and queen's domestic routine, had transformed into an uncompromising constitutional battlefield over an unsigned design lease and a corporate eviction notice. The facts behind this explosive confrontation were documented in a highly restricted security memo logged by the on-duty Metropolitan Police Protection Officer stationed outside the drawing room door. Camilla had summoned the Prince of Wales to Clarence house less than 2 hours after her sister, Annabel Elliot, had received the formal non-renewal notices from the Duchy of Cornwall's compliance team. The Queen Consort did not attempt to mask her fury behind the standard, polite conventions of royal diplomacy. She viewed the sudden, clinical termination of her sister's 20-year design retainers as a vindictive, deeply personal assault on her immediate family, executed by William to publicly humiliate her household and signal his total disapproval of her lineage. The tension in the drawing room spiked instantly as Camilla openly confronted William over his defiance of traditional royal protocol. She argued that for over 2 decades, her sister had dedicated her professional life to revitalizing the historic interiors of the royal properties, creating a globally recognized aesthetic that had directly boosted the estate's commercial values and tourism revenues. She pointed out that Annabel had worked with absolute discretion, navigating the intense pressures of the court without a single press leak or public scandal. To throw an 81-year-old family member off the estate books using a cold corporate legal notice, without a single face-to-face discussion, was, in her view, an act of unmitigated malice that breached the basic rules of domestic respect. William did not back down an inch from his position, and his voice remained entirely level, carrying the cold authority of a corporate CEO enforcing an absolute compliance directive. He looked directly at his stepmother and stated that his decision had nothing to do with personal animosity and everything to do with modern institutional survival. He explained that under the strict new procurement policies he had enacted at the duchy headquarters, the era of unmonitored family retainers, legacy monopolies, and non-competitive contracts was permanently dead. Every single supplier drawing income from the estate had to submit to a transparent public bidding pool to protect the crown from the highly damaging public accusations of nepotism and financial favoritism. The argument quickly shifted from the specific interior design retainers to a much larger structural battle over the future control of the royal finances. Camilla accused William of using corporate compliance as a convenient political smokescreen to launch a wider, systematic purge of her bloodline from the material fabric of the court. She noted that over the past 12 months, Kensington Palace had systematically blocked her son from taking on ceremonial roles, locked the children's historic heirloom vaults behind biometric encryption codes, and now stripped her sister of her commercial livelihood. She told William that by enforcing these aggressive red lines, he was treating her family like untrusted financial predators who were a threat to the state, effectively isolating her household while the king was focused on his recovery. The mystery that senior courtiers scrambled to manage behind the scenes was whether King Charles would intervene directly to overrule his heir's financial decree. The answer was uncovered by William's auditing team within a set of encrypted files retrieved from the Privy Purse treasury room that very afternoon. In an effort to shield his wife's sister from the public humiliation of the eviction, Charles had quietly instructed his personal financial trustees to draft a private, offshore framework agreement. The king intended to use his own personal funds, entirely separate from the Duchy of Cornwall or the public sovereign grant, to set up a private design trust that would continue to fund Annabel Elliott's restoration projects at Highgrove House under a civilian consulting retainer. However, William's newly appointed corporate compliance team had anticipated the maneuver. Under the updated 26 oversight regulations that William had forced through the Joint Estate Council, any private financial trust operated by a member of the royal family that utilized crown-owned properties or historical structures for its operations had to be formally registered and approved by the Prince of Wales's legal board. The moment the draft agreement was flagged by the automated audit filters, William's lawyers issued an immediate administrative block. They informed the King's private secretary that continuing to employ Elliott on Crown property using private funds would still constitute a major conflict of interest, violating the strict new transparency charter that governed the entire institution. The absolute failure of the King's private counterproposal left Camilla entirely without options, breaking the final string of her patience during the clash at Clarence House. She looked at William and stated that his refusal to compromise was a dangerous, arrogant overreach that was actively damaging the internal stability of the monarchy. She warned him that by running the palace like a cold, clinical corporation and alienating the loyal family members who had supported his father's reign, he was creating a permanent domestic rift that would make a public unified front entirely impossible during upcoming state occasions. She accused him of acting like the king before he had even inherited the crown, completely dismissing the authority of the current monarch. William remained entirely unmoved by her warnings, picking up his leather briefcase from the desk with a calm, deliberate efficiency that signaled the end of the meeting. He told her that he was fully prepared to accept the domestic consequences of his policy because his ultimate duty was to ensure the absolute corporate legitimacy of the kingdom for the next generation. He made it explicitly clear that as long as he managed the Duchy of Cornwall, the financial boundary lines would be defended with iron discipline, and no non-blood relative would ever be permitted to leverage crown resources for private economic gain. He delivered a cold, formal nod to his stepmother, walked out of the drawing room, and left Clarence House immediately, leaving the Queen Consort to face the reality of her shattered influence. The fallout from that furious clash marked a permanent, irreversible turning point in the internal power dynamics of the modern court. William had successfully demonstrated to the entire household staff, the financial directors, and the legal advisors that his commercial red lines were completely non-negotiable. Regardless of the emotional cost within the family, he had successfully blocked the king's private offshore trust, enforced the total eviction of Annabel Elliott's firm, and proved that he held the raw financial leverage to dictate the terms of governance behind closed palace doors. The strategic purge of the step-family tree was complete. The legacy design retainers were buried forever, and the corporate sovereign had successfully secured the absolute purity of his future empire. Prince William has officially rewritten the rules of the court, executing an uncompromising financial purge to protect the corporate integrity of the royal estates. By launching this sudden crackdown on Queen Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliott, the Prince of Wales, has proved that no non-blood relative will ever be permitted to leverage crown resources for private gain. What do you think about this aggressive move by the future king? Did William make the right choice by enforcing strict corporate compliance across the multi-billion-pound Duchy of Cornwall estate? Or was his sudden eviction of an 81-year-old family member an unnecessary and cold escalation against Queen Camilla's inner circle? Tell me your exact thoughts in the comments section down below. If you want to stay ahead of the curve with urgent updates, tactical breakdowns, and deep dives into the fierce power struggles dividing the British royal family, make sure to click the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Thank you for watching today's video, and I will see you all in the very next story.